report. I've given the organization, Layton City, the best report I can give. It's called an unmodified opinion. So we don't feel there's any material misstatements within the financial statements. Obviously, we can't audit every single transactions and test everything, but we do lots of confirmations with outside parties and so forth to test the balances and that are in there, and then lots of sampling test work. So we feel the statements are fairly presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles and following government standards as well. The second report is found towards the back of the book, and that's a report on internal control, your compliance with laws and regulations and so forth. As far as an internal control standpoint, we didn't find any weaknesses in the way that the city's designed and how they handle cash receipting, journal entries, cash disbursements, budgeting type process, all that type stuff. So we feel the city's in a good, strong, they've got some good segregation of duties going on in order to handle the finances and are following the policies that you as a legislative body have asked management to follow when it comes to accounting practices. The final report is required by the state auditor's office. They put in, there's two requirements on that one. There's stuff we have to test every year, and there's stuff that we have to test every 3 years. So some of the stuff that we test is you guys adopting a budget and submitting that timely. If you do truth in taxation, make sure you hold your public hearings and then submit your budget or submit that information to the county and adopt your budget by August. If you are adopting a certified tax rate, it's due come June. So we'll look at that stuff. We look at enrolling employees within Utah retirement systems. We'll look at your fund balance percentage in the general fund, because that's an area, there's a code on state law that you need to follow that needs to be between 5 and 35%. And we'll look at items like that. There's some other things, but to keep this short and to give Tracy some time with some numbers, we had two findings when it came to that. One is in that fund balance percentage. Your fund balance percentage is made up of your committed, your assigned, and your unassigned fund balance in the general fund. You compare that with the general fund's revenues that they receive for the current year. So that was about 25 million compared to 51 million in revenue. So your fund balance is just shy of 50%. We've rounded it up. You're at 50%. Obviously, that's 15% over. For us as auditors, that's probably the funnest finding we can give your organizations, because say you're well funded, you've got money to use for hopefully projects. If not, you're looking to say, are our tax rates too high? Audit committee and management doesn't feel that that's the case. We just have some excess capacity, especially when you look at all the money that's come in from CARES Act, ARPA funding, and that can be transferred to capital projects. And you can actually, if you go and talk to your city engineer, he's always got projects you can work on. The second finding we had is your community development block grant fund went over on their budget. Now, probably just misunderstanding on this one. You set a budget or a budget for him to follow on expenditures. They exceeded that by 40. But in defense, I guess, of what happened on the fund, he had excess funds from last year and he thought those rolled over to the current year budget. It just didn't get caught in time by the time the money on the projects were spent. So slight overage, but it's a yes or no. Are you over or you're not over? So that was our second finding. Typically, you don't find those within the city, but occasionally, little small errors that take place. I wish I didn't have to report it, but it's a yes or no question. So, any questions?
Yeah, that was $40.
40,000, like $251.
You kind of got to say everything out there, because I take everything out. 40,000.
Maybe to clarify on that one,
$40. I may say look the other way.
Yeah.
maybe to put you at ease, we had the money. It was approved by CDBG. It just didn't get put in our budget. So that's, I can take responsibility for that. I mean, we do a year-end review. We should have caught it in that review and come to you when we do our year-end budget amendments. On the other hand, like Rob has mentioned, the program manager didn't mention to us, he didn't bring it to our attention because he thought it was already in there. Just more or less a misunderstanding, but at the same time, something we need to watch very closely. And generally we do, yeah.
So you mentioned that those funds had rolled over. Were they not supposed to roll over, or it just needed to be accounted for?
So they don't roll over in the budget. You have to put it back in the budget. You may have had savings from last year, but unless you put it back into the budget and rebudget it for 2022, or in this case, 2023 now, it drops off.
Okay, so just in accounting, basically, it wasn't accounted for, but
Yeah.
it's okay to be rolled over.
So the federal government had already awarded it. What it was those COVID small business grants.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
So that funding was out there. We didn't spend it all in the original couple of years, but it was still there, hadn't expired. They had some expenditures during 2022 with that, thinking that the budget had just automatically rolled into the next year. Anyway, that's kind of how it.
Benefit with this particular fund compared to another one, this is tracking federal dollars. So you either have them or you don't, and if you don't, you're not spending it. Unless the city decides to do a contribution, but this fund is tracking what's going on with our federal dollars when it comes to CDBG, which is probably a program we're gonna do a single audit here in the next few weeks to make sure they're following the federal compliance guidelines. But I need to run the calculations because I think you've got about 1.1 to 1.2 million dollars. So we need to perform a single audit and we'll complete that by middle of January.
So before we go through numbers, do we need to move on and let these other guys do theirs, and then if we have time at the end, circle back? Or would that be
Fine.
Would that be Mayor? Or would that be?
Sure.
I just don't want to get into a bunch of numbers and then we run out of time for these other important issues. Is that?
Okay, so
Is
what
that all
you're
right
saying
with
is we want to go ahead and move on to the landscaping requirement or the apparatus?
Can I
What do
say
you want to
something
do?
before we get out of this? So how is that? What's your opinion of what you looked at?
This city is very well run.
Thank
If I were to put, we do over 14, right now we're doing about 14 cities. We have a school district, some counties. And that I was telling the audit committee, if I were to put my organizations into tier groups, A, B, C, Layton City's in that A group. I just presented one just the other night who had 6 compliance findings. One that I'm baffled by. They never submitted a budget to the state auditor's office. It's like, how do you not submit a budget? Especially since you got that finding for submitting it late in 2021. So I had 6 repeat findings for that organization. So if you want to say, where do you stand? You're still in my top echelon group with the cities that we manage.
Well, we knew that. I knew that if you said something different, you'd lie on.
I just wanted a testimonial, right? You just wanted a testimonial.
Yeah, that's
For the
all.
record.
Well, and remember, we got our outside citizens on this committee as well that are
Well, I know,
a
that's,
really good job.
I mean, the people that are on that committee,
Yeah.
Clinton, I believe you're on it, the audit committee, I mean, that's great. We're bringing up things and taking care of items, and that's enough for me to say.
Yeah, one of those committee members, Van Christensen, actually trained me when I came out of school.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Well, that's kind of neat.
so it's fun.
Glad we got him then.
He's a good hire. He's a good volunteer per se, because he doesn't get paid to do this.
All right, we'll jump into landscaping. This is we've had this ordinance in place for a couple of years now. As with all ordinances like this, over time you find things that need to be tweaked, and this is what we're looking at here tonight. So when our new landscaping ordinance was adopted, of course this was a pretty comprehensive change to the landscape ordinance. We went from kind of the old thought process of a lot of turf, a lot of water using type landscaping to water-wise landscaping. As we changed that code, we had a couple of places where it talked about when we would require this new landscaping to be met. One of those places had to do with the dollar amount. So in the ordinance right now, if someone spends $75,000 on improvements to their building, they're required to bring their property into this new water-wise landscaping code. Now that was an increase. We had it at $50,000 before. We thought, well, with prices of things and the inflation that's occurred over the years, we probably ought to bump that up a little bit. Now, just to go backwards, when we talk about the old ordinance, when we were talking about compliance then, really we were talking about someone that might have to add a little bit of a landscape area with some turf, or maybe add a couple of trees that they hadn't put in before, something like that. Very, very seldom was it a big comprehensive change to the landscaping. With the new water-wise landscaping, many times it's a complete overhaul of landscape areas. We're taking out pop-up sprinklers, we're putting back drip type systems with emitters. So in that case, the expense can be far, far more than what in the previous ordinance was anticipated. So what we looked at was, what can we do to make a rough proportionality between what the city is requiring and what the people are proposing. Now, $75,000, first of all, doesn't go that far anymore. We've had some of those people that have come in for some very small changes to the interior that have exceeded $75,000. Retiling, repainting, those kind of things can in some cases exceed that $75,000 amount anyway. So it's been our goal again to try to come up with something that will work. Now, there's a good example of this. Dick's Sporting Goods. Dick's comes in for an improvement to their building. It's all interior that they're doing, and they come in and they say, well, we're going to spend $200,000. This was some structural improvements, all interior. Some of it was cosmetic. Some of it was just updating some of their interior signage, things that required electrical permits, but it hit $200,000. That's well above $75,000. As we looked at that, though, as we look at the property that sits on, we're on a 22-acre site, the mall, with a property valuation of $57 million. You can see that improvement cost, compared to what that property is and what the size of that property is, the landscaping that would need to be done, it's far out of proportion with what the request was. I'm going to get back to these two numbers in just a second, but what we talked about with in particular Dick's remodel was, again, is this really proportional to what they're asking for? So as we looked at kind of the 3-year building permit history, what's happened in our city, which we tried to get some real numbers. We wanted to base any kind of recommendation on what's actually happening out there. What we saw was that you could kind of break these down into these categories. So you've got size, properties with sizes of 10 acres or more, 5 to 10 acres, 1 to 5, and 0 to 1. And we looked at what those average property values were for those types of, and again, we're talking about commercial and multifamily. We're not talking about single family homes. We're talking about commercial and multifamily. As we looked at that, that was the average property values for those various categories. Then we found that based on real projects that have been submitted, that those projects that typically would be projects that we would say through kind of our, and I will admit some of this is a gut check, but the kind of projects that would require exterior remodels. For example, someone that's redoing their parking lot, or someone that is changing the outside of their building, or doing major overhauls to the interior of their building, or changing use, things that are major type projects. We found that the average of those types of projects was about 20% of the property value. That's about what those projects would cost. So we said for those projects that we have looked at and said, yeah, that's one that we feel would require application of this ordinance, or that would be big enough to require application of the ordinance. That was that number that we saw kind of a pattern. It was about 20% of that average property value that got to that level. And that kind of gives you those average improvement costs over on that side. Now, this number, 4%, we also said, is there a number that someone could get to that would be a minimum number that we'd want to see some type of landscape improvements? Now, this 4% is actually across all these categories. That's the average of all of those categories. And that comes to about 220,000 roughly. And that is a place that we said, if there's anything that's most important for us to get changed, it would be those park strips. Those are the biggest water wasters, are the ones that actually most developers see the value of replacing that with some water-wise landscaping. So we said, what would be that minimum value across those categories that we could get to that would require, or that we would recommend changing those park strips? And that was the number that we came up with, was the 222. So again, these are numbers that we've tried to come up with from real data that we've seen, that we've observed through our building permit process. So again, our recommendation would be that rather than having a flat 75,000, which again we can get to with very little improvement really to any structure right now, that we would adopt a tiered structure that would look at the value of the property and the value of the proposed construction, and then we look at that percentage of that value and base that requirement on that percentage. So we have taken this to our planning commission. One of the concerns that they had was how we establish the value. We've added some language that can help with that. We're going to be looking at the tax notices. We've got a little bit of a language tweak that you'll see. One of our planning commissioners is a appraiser and an assessor, so he said, hey, you really ought to use this language instead of that. So the language will be a little bit tweaked from that, which was very helpful for us to get from him. But just that would be one of the ways we'd establish that property value is based on the most recent tax valuation data that's available from Davis County. If we don't have that, then they could provide us with an appraisal of the property that's recent that we could base that value on. I talked about that a little bit about Park Strip. I failed to say one thing, and then I'll take any questions you may have. One thing that's really important to mention is that we've had many of our businesses that have said, this is great. We have no problem meeting your new ordinance. We have received some pushback on some projects, particularly projects where it's a very large property, where they have said, you know, the cost of me bringing my landscaping up to your new code far exceeds the improvement that I'm proposing, and if I have to do it, I'll probably pull back from this project. So that's what's made us concerned, is that these are really good projects where people are updating their buildings, they're reinvesting in their business. We don't want to kill those types of projects, but we do think that it is fair that when we have a major improvement, we have major reinvestment, that at that time we bring this thing up to code. So, you know, examples of folks that have just willingly and very happily complied. McDonald's on North Main, that was one, we told them the standard, they said, we'd be happy to do that. So they redid all their landscaping. The Swim Kids use over on Fairfield was another one. They said, that makes total sense to us. And so you can actually see them working on that right now, bringing that within our code for the waterways. So that's, today's purpose is just to give you a basic overview, get an idea if this is a direction you'd like us to go. Alex asked a really good question earlier today about other cities. There are some cities that have a valuation type system for requiring landscaping. Others base it on the type of land use application that's been submitted. They'll say, if you bring in a conditional use permit or a site plan, you have to do that. Murray does a valuation, theirs is 50%. So we felt like that was a little bit high because those are some huge numbers, and we feel like before that we ought to be requiring some of this landscape improvement. Just to give you an idea of our code, and then I'll take any questions you have. We have standards right now that this is the same way that we would apply that. So our floodplain management standards, if someone comes in and invests more than 51% of the value of their home, they have to meet the applicable floodplain standards. Our ADA standards, for American with Disability Act standards, that's another one that if they come to a certain value of reinvestment in the property, they have to then meet all those American with Disabilities Act requirements. So it's not unprecedented. We think it's a good way to do this and a fair way to do this, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
You had another slide, the last slide? Was it, oh, maybe you didn't.
This was just talking about that minimum number where we require park strip compliance, yeah.
Cool.
It'll be coming back to you. Planning Commission has seen it with a few tweaks. They've recommended approval, so.
So if, just in practice, if they had a project and this is what they had to meet, and they weren't really desirous to make any landscape changes, but they needed to come in compliance, they would just find some scenario that got them to that dollar figure to be able to be in compliance.
You mean under the dollar
Yeah.
figure? Yeah, I mean, we have ways that we check those costs, so we don't just take everything they say for granted. We say, you know, is that really based on reality in our numbers? There's some tools available in the building code to double check those numbers and make sure that we're getting a reasonable estimate. What we found is that maybe not everyone, but most of the people that are spending those big dollar amounts, they know they need to make those kind of changes. They don't push back that much. We've had one exception to that. Most of them have been, hey, yeah, we get it. We're making a big change to our property. We need to bring this up to code. And a lot of them, we would hope more of them, but a lot of them see the value. They're going to save, over the long run, they're going to save money on water, on maintenance because of meeting these new water-wise landscaping standards.
And I think a lot of our businesses out there are thinking of just enhancing the landscaping and not necessarily their business, the ones that are already pretty well taken in good shape. I've had several of them ask me if there's any type of program or whatever for them to kind of get on board with water-wise.
Yeah.
The planning commission might have an appraiser, but we have Dave.
Sure.
Okay.
Don't get them going.
That's why we're having this discussion.
Okay, well,
Thank
thanks,
you, ma'am.
Chad. We appreciate that. That's a good update. And it was some food for thought for kind of a great background. Okay, let's go ahead and do item number 4 then. Mr. Wills, yes, you're it. Yeah, right?
Yeah, I'll just mention real quick,
Okay.
just real quickly, and Brad will give you expertise behind it, but
Okay.
we've done this before. We wanted to talk to you about an opportunity to purchase apparatus, a fire truck. The intention was in this upcoming budget year to request funds for a new engine as part of the engine replacement program that we have. And as we've done a couple of times before, and Brad is excellent at this, and Chief Ward, as they approached me a little over a week ago and said we have been made aware of an opportunity from Pierce Manufacturing. We've had a lot of Pierce, very well known, very well respected in the industry. We have some of their units that have served us well through the years. There is an opportunity to get a demo model that meets our specs and what we have, and we can purchase it at significant reduction in cost. And there were 2 of them available in the whole country. The one that we were looking at was made aware of was in Houston, and so when I talked to Chief Ward, the numbers are so significant. You'll see Brad can talk about the specifics, but we can save about $250,000 on the purchase of the engine. If we purchase it now, it's readily available. We don't have to wait 2 years to get it, and we have some grants and other opportunities, some other money in-house. One of the things we've been doing the last several years with our wildland fire money, when the firefighters go out and represent other agencies or take care of issues for other agencies, we make sure that we pull that money back by consensus, administration and the fire. We pull that and we put some of that, we pay the wages that are offset. But then the rest of that, we don't take and just use. We put it in an account and let it grow for future apparatus purchases. So we have $110,000 in that account currently that can be used toward this. Plus we have a grant that Brad can talk about. And so we think it makes very good business sense to purchase this vehicle and save money, then that would defer the need for the request in the budget next year at a significant savings. So Ben, why don't you speak to the specifics? And Brad just does an exceptional, he builds fire stations, and he's the main guy on the truck, and he's big assets, Brad. Really, he does a great job. It's very thorough and represents the city's interests extremely well. So thank you, Brad.
Thanks, Alex. So page 2, since we're short on time, we're looking at saving $253,000 to buy this now. The EPA grant we applied for almost a year ago. So what that is, you take old diesel engines. Part of the Volkswagen settlement to the United States was they put billions in these funds, the EPA region. The grant was horrible to work through. We got off approved for 25%, so we tried to use it. Our last engine purchase wouldn't let us. It has to be ordered or purchased after the award. So it's 25%. The numbers are right there. This engine is significantly lower than anything that we bought. It's not the paramedic engine that we bought before, just so it's clear. This is very similar to one we're running now. It's 2009. It will work exceptionally well for us. And I would have been remiss to not bring it to Alex. I know he doesn't like mid-year stuff at all, but this is such a savings for the city. So the first part talks about it. So Paycar is the owner of Peterbilt and Kenworth. They're the parent company. They're building their own motors now. They have been for a few years. They're getting into the custom fire market, which requires a bunch of testing. So they dropped Paycar motors in Pierce engines, ran them for 25,000 miles. They pulled the motors out for testing and certification. Pierce put a brand new motor in it. Cummins L9, which is what we run on all of our other stuff. This engine's warranted as it was built yesterday, so we get full warranties across the board. This engine, if I bought it on the order, it would be about $700,000, $697 for this configuration. So we're getting it for $549, fully warranted.
47 then.
Yeah, so, that second page, the summary, that's comparing, because we were going to order another engine because we didn't feel like we wanted to walk away from $187,000 grant because we have to have the fire trucks. You'd have told me 20 years ago we were paying $1 million for a fire truck. We built 52 for this, if you remember, $750.
The whole station.
Yeah, the whole station, yeah.
But that was the reason for my request. Any questions?
I just have one question. Initially, when we were gonna be requesting the, engine in the next year's budget, you were going to be requesting a paramedic engine similar to the one?
No,
we did last
we
time?
were gonna do just an engine.
Okay,
Yeah, the paramedic engine, we can run paramedics out of this. I've got the compartment space that we would like, but with everything, we're changing our paradigm with apparatus. You know, it was me that brought in the vans 7 years ago, and we're headed that direction with fire trucks. I'm a taxpayer, I live in Layton, my family raised here. I can't come to you and ask for $1 million for a fire truck that we run the wheels off with. So we're all the time looking at, we may even be shifting to smaller fire trucks in the future. I can't answer that.
So, if this wasn't available and you're asking for a new engine for the next year's budget, we don't get that engine for 2 more years, is that correct?
Potentially.
This is, you get it now.
I talked to, yeah,
What's it gonna cost 2 years from now for that,
Well-
that we're looking for? I mean,
I wrote this and then talked to him just yesterday on this demo, and he said, by the way, plan on 16%, not 8% in July,
Yeah.
because the cost is still. I'm like, when is this ever gonna?
Plus the 18 months out just for the
They're
chassis, let
says-
alone the box and everything else.
Depending on where it's built, it could be 400 days,
Yeah.
I was told yesterday. If it's built in Wisconsin, we're almost 3 years. If it's built in Ocala, Florida, it's,
Yeah, yeah.
but yeah, it's,
So based on thinking, my feeling, or the guess that he's supportive of this, they have, the engine's actually here, right? It's in Utah.
no, they delayed it because of it'll be here next Wednesday.
They were
Yeah,
driving it this
they were gonna
week.
bring it yesterday, and they decided not to drive it in the snow, which we were
Take it
appreciative
home
of.
with
very
it.
smart.
No, I thought they were gonna drive it by and
Yeah.
say, hey, look out the window, it's right there.
It's right there.
No, you know, if this is authorized, it'll be in Salt Lake for probably a month, because we do have to do some stuff to get it where we need it, some.
So how did we get so lucky?
Because Brad's always on it.
Brad shopping.
He's
Yeah,
always shopping.
Ed and I joke, but we try to out cheap each other for the city all the time. But I know, you know, I'm responsible for our fire fleet, and it's difficult to keep up. And, you know, we were told at the shop today that administrative vehicles, just the cost of steel for buying a Dodge truck is gonna be at 15% in our budget cycle. So we're trying to give a budget to Alex, guessing, and that's all it is just a wild guess for me. You know, it could be $900,000 if we go to bid in July. I don't know.
Well, I like the fact that this is the same as engines that we already have, so that, you know, I mean, when it does come to parts and maintenance and that, it's easy to get.
Yeah,
So,
they're
that's smart.
the biggest manufacturer. Well, the big thing for me is Siddons Martin bought the dealerships. They run 17 dealerships in 9 states. There's no problem getting service, where before we didn't buy Pierce's because the service was horrible. And service for us actually means more than the price of the truck. And when we were buying LaFrance's and other, the service company at the time was fabulous, and now they suck. So
Good.
that's a bigger thing for us.
Do we want to, so do you just need a head nod?
Yeah,
What do you
just
need
this
on this?
authorization, we'll use the wildland fire funds and the apply for the grant, and then we'll just fund the balance out of a fund balance, which will be a healthy fund balance. And two old diesel engines.
Didn't take us long,
that are
did
direct up the trains.
We're in compliance.
15 minutes. That's a record I've reached.
See?
They're part of it.
Thank you.
Okay, we good?
Thanks, Brad.
All right, let's,
So,
Thank
so
you.
we can give you a write-off on your taxes or something. Little kickback for Brad. So that's a joke, by the way.
Go on your way.
okay, it's already 7. Let's go ahead and go in the other room and I want to welcome those that are here tonight to our Layton City Council meeting for December 15th. Our start time is 7:03. And we'll go ahead and start our council meeting with the pledge and then the prayer. So this month, I believe, is my month, so I'll just go ahead and conduct. So all those that would, I'd ask you to please rise and let's have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our kind Father in heaven, we bow our heads this evening in grace and appreciation for all that thou does for each and every one of us. We come before thee this evening as a special thank you for the moisture we've been receiving and for the ability to be able to enjoy this holiday season and the birth of the Christmas celebration. We're grateful for the kind and generous folks we have in our city, and we ask a special blessing to be upon them, as well as all of our first responders and those folks that are out there in the late evening hours helping keep this city running properly, as well as those throughout the day. We're grateful for this governing body, for all the help and dedication and time that they devote to making the strong decisions that they need to. We ask thee to be upon us this evening as we conduct the business of this city, and pray that all of us will enjoy the next weeks to come and celebrate the birth of thy Christ. And we say these things dearly in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen. Okay. Again, I'd like to welcome everyone out tonight. We do need to approve several sets of minutes. So with that, council, does anyone have any changes or corrections to those that have been posted so far? If not, I will look for action. And if you could just go ahead and state the minute date as you read the approval.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve the minutes of the following meetings: the minutes of Layton City Council meeting September 1, 2022, council meeting on September 15th, 2022, council work meeting November 3, 2022, council meeting November 3, 2022, council work meeting on November 17th, 2022, special council meeting on November 17th, 2022, and the minutes from Layton City Council meeting on November 17th, 2022.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, it's been moved and second that we adopt the minutes as written and presented. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. We'll now go on to our municipal announcements. So council, who has announcements to be made?
Ongoing, as we've had them since Thanksgiving, the lights before Christmas will continue through New Year's Eve, open from 6 p.m. to 11 to 10 p.m. And a special activity in the next couple days, I'm going to turn it over to Council Member Thomas to tell us about that, since he's driving that ship.
We got a train running out there. If you want to ride, hop on. Costs you $2 though. Some of you guys, we might charge a little more, but just don't tell us you're a lawyer and you'll be fine. But it runs for a couple hours. It's a lot of fun. Bring your kids. It's more fun for the kids than grown-ups. So that's all I got.
And they can visit the hot chocolate shack as well.
Oh, I forgot about the hot chocolate shack.
That's okay.
If you want a ticket, go to the hot chocolate shack and they'll sell you tickets. We sell them there too, but you can buy them there and walk over and get on.
Okay, thank you.
So Davis Arts Council has their small stage concert series. This is the first and third Friday of every month between October and April, and they're free just across the parking lot here. And also OPA, On Pitch Performing Arts, they are doing their Holiday Follies show. started on last night, and that'll be going through the 19th.
Very good. That's a fun show. I saw it last year, and it was a lot of fun. Okay, anyone else? Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead then and go on to our citizens' comment at this point in time. So if anyone in the audience would like to address the council, you're more than happy. We'd ask you to go to either side of the podium, state your name and address for the record.
Hello, I'm Brendan McDonald from 2097 East 25 South, and I just had a little comment. I noticed going down Gentile by Smiths, a lot of drivers go really, really fast. I was wondering if there's a way to maybe put like a sign or maybe some sort of light kind of coming down, because I've almost seen some accidents, and that's just my comment, so.
You're talking Smith's grocery store, not their distribution?
The grocery store, yeah, kind of like below the church kind of there, because a lot of people turn right and they go really, really fast, so I've almost seen some accidents, so, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else? Okay, seeing that there's no other comments, I'm going to go ahead and go on to item number 5, which is our consent items tonight. Actually, we only have one, so with that, I'm going to turn the time over to Tracy Probert, who's our finance director, to give us the report on our financial year end of June 30 of 2022.
Yeah. Mayor, members of the council, good evening. So we bring to you tonight our annual comprehensive financial report. Includes the financial statements of the city, the independent auditor's opinion, and the independent auditor's reports on compliance and internal control. Before I get into that too much, I'd like to turn a little bit of time over to your independent auditor, Robert Wood from HBME, and he'll discuss his audit reports with the mayor and council.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Pleasure to be with you this evening. As we presented in your work meeting, we have our independent audit reports and then 2 separate reports at the back of the book. My pleasure to report to you. I've given you the best opinion that we as a CPA firm can provide your organization. It's an unmodified opinion. We don't feel there's any material misstatements or discrepancies of noteworthy in your financial statements. If we found adjustments, those were made by management. Second report in the back of the book is on internal control and on your compliance with laws and regulations. We didn't find, that's not an opinion, but it's a report. We didn't find anything that needs to be reported as a material weakness, a significant deficiency, or a control deficiency. So it's a clean report. The last one is required by the state auditor's office. It's your compliance with the state laws and Utah code. Now, there's certain things that we test every year. There's certain things that we test, or certain things that we test annually, certain things that we test on a 3-year rotation basis. We did find 2 items that needed to be reported as a finding this year. The first one, our favorite one to present, your general fund balance. When you look at your assigned and unassigned and committed funds compared to your general fund revenues, you're at 50%. State code wants you to be between minimum of 5%, maximum of 35%. So in essence, you have some funding to go out and do projects. We heard about one with the fire truck, so you're on your way to spending some of that money that needs to be done. The second one is your community and economic development, or your community development block grant funding, which tracks all your federal expenditures for CDBG. That fund had an overage on the final budget that you adopted compared to the total actual expenditures by just over $40,000. Really, from our understanding with management, that was an oversight. It's spending federal dollars. They don't receive funding really from any other source but tracking the CDBG dollars. So just an oversight from last year's carryover that didn't get physically put into or amended in the budget this year. So small finding. Other than that, everything else is clean. Okay. Any questions?
Any questions, council?
Thanks for your work on that.
Thank you.
How many municipalities, other entities that you do get a modified opinion? So how often do we see an unmodified compared to a modified opinion?
Unmodified. Basically, I've never done a modified opinion. I had the worst report I've ever provided. It's still an unmodified report because we corrected things. But I did hand out on that one some material weaknesses and a significant deficiency. That's the worst report I've ever given. Okay. And that organization corrected themselves within 1 year's time to fix the problem that was in place.
Okay. So it's really material misstatements. I mean, that's a pretty high bar to meet. That's why I asked. And then the findings that you found for us, they're things that don't go towards internal controls or any of those weaknesses. It's just something that we just need to get touched up and hopefully.
Correct. Is it monitoring your budget? With the CDBG, the director that's over that program, thought the money was already there. Because for him, it was just a carryover. He's dealing with money that he's got from years for CDBG, who issues, you guys are an entitlement entity, so you get it directly from the federal government, from the HUD, who provides those funds. So he's just dealing with, I've still got these blocks of money that I haven't spent yet, and he has so many years to do it. So for him, he's not tracking it by really year, he's tracking it by his HUD project award numbers, which is one of the things that we're going to look at. Your agent's organization has spent more than $750,000, so we're actually going to come back because we hadn't had time to finish that up and perform a single audit. So I think by the middle of January, end of January, we'll have a single audit completed for you on your federal programs. That's not just CDBG, but there's JAG and other grants that you get that are federal based, whether you get it directly from the federal government or you get it from the county and it's federal dollars, or the state and it's federal dollars. It's still federal dollars. One of your members out here, Van Christensen, who's on the audit committee, that's what he deals with day in and day out. So we're basically told by the federal government, this is what we want done with the money. You as the auditors, go out and find out, is that what was done with the money, or if they're using it for some other purpose? If they are, then we issue a report, and there could potentially be paybacks if you inappropriately spend that money.
Thank you. And I mean, since you don't really ever see modified opinions, maybe just for the purposes of any of the residents who are watching and wanting to know about our accounting and how well the city is managed, if you've always given unmodified opinions, that's probably not good information for the people at home if they always get that. But you mentioned something in the work meeting about where you see our management structure and style. Can you just speak to that so our residents can have some more information about?
So I've had the privilege of auditing with Layton City for a number of years. And really, our firm right now is performing these similar audits on 14 municipalities. Plus we have a school district, we have a couple of counties, and several just special local districts that we do. If I were to put our municipalities into like an A, B, and C grouping, Layton City's by far, they are one of my A list type clients. One is you've got a great council that cares about the reports. You've got a great city manager and department heads that he works with that really follows what you put in place and the direction and so forth that is provided. So top-notch individuals that are running the city. We feel that you've got good segregation of duties. You care about your stuff. It's more, let's do it on a pay-as-we-go and not borrow all these funds. One of the things we talked about is debt. You've only got $1.2 million worth of bonds. I have organizations that have issued over $15 to $20 million just this year alone in debt. Now, sometimes it's good because you can get a low rate, but if the economy does take a south turn, you're only having like just over $300,000 worth of committed payments that you have to do. Some of these other organizations have millions of dollars that they have to pay each year out of their sales tax. Now, flip side, you've got Utopia. I mean, so that's kind of your side. It wasn't issued by you, but you backed the debt, and that you're covering it. And they seem to be doing quite a bit better. In fact, I think they started maybe even issuing out some rebates to the city. So that's looking up as far as that program goes. But I love coming and working with the people of Layton. Tracy can attest to this. I do put his people through the firework and making sure this stuff is right. I don't just brush stuff under the rug. I care about I used to be a resident of Layton City, so I really care about how this financial statement turns out.
Good. We appreciate that. And just as an independent, look into this, and we have our two great residents that help us out with that. So it's just a good approach where we have someone that puts our staff through the ringer. And I think as a council, I don't think we take credit for how well the city's managed. It's the professional staff that does it. So thank you for doing the work for us as a council and as the citizens. So thanks.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
That's a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Maybe not a question, a comment. We talked about the fund balance, unassigned fund balance, that percentage that the state, they changed it from 25% to 35%, and we're over that. We're at 50%, meaning we've got more money than we should. However, you mentioned that ARPA money and CARES Act money, this one-time money, that's still in that, if you look at it as a big pot, it's still in that pot. It's still part of the calculation. Taking that money out, we get closer to that 35.
Oh, most definitely. If you look at what you've received over the last couple of years, in ARPA funds for fiscal year 22, it was $4.8 million. You also received that in July or October of this year, your second installment. So you've received another $4.8, $4.9 million. Now, I know a lot of that's being dedicated to the public safety building that's going to be built right outside the parking lot here. You look at the CARES Act money that came in. I mean, the federal government has pumped billions, I should say, and you've been the recipient of millions of those dollars to come in. Well, you already had budgets set up, so this is really subsidized or added to your budget. A lot of the, like the CARES Act money was helping to pay for first responders, paid for a lot of the public safety. So you still had the funds set aside, but you got another revenue source that came in, which has allowed you as an organization to go out and say, what other projects do we have that will benefit our residents? And I think you're taking place on some of those with road maintenance, park upgrades, park improvements. The list continues to go on, and I heard a presentation in there from your fire chief on he found a great buy. If you look at like fire trucks, they're taking over 2 years to go out and get. He's got one that you might be able to get within a week or two at a $250,000+ savings on a buy. Who knows what those are going to go if you were to wait. That might cost you 3 times that for what he's looking at. So I think it stipulates to the people that you have running your different departments. They manage the funds really well.
Okay. Thanks. Okay. Any more comments? Tracy, maybe before you get started, I know you're going to present the numbers, but I think it would be wise if we can at least acknowledge our 2 citizens that are on this committee. So, gentlemen, Doug, Vaughn, Ben, do you mind coming up? Just stand up here so the camera guy can get a hold of you. And certainly if you want to make a quick statement on this, I think it would be good, because I think this truly shows how this council and myself and the staff appreciate the work that goes into this. And not only that, the time, the volunteer time of the experts within our city that are part of this audit committee. So thank you.
I could make one comment if I could.
Yes, I'd love it.
So we appreciate being part of it. It's fun to, I do. It's good to be with good people, and appreciate the work that Tracy does in the finance department, certainly as a member of the city. The one thing, Councilmember Loxham, you asked the question like unmodified opinion, what does that mean? It basically means that financial statements are fairly presented. It doesn't mean that it's good news or bad news. So you can have financial position that's very bad, insolvent or something like that, and it can still be an unmodified opinion. It can still be good. And I think the one thing that I would just point out is that, as Doug and I look at the financial statements, I think we both would agree that the city's financial, the news is good. So yes, it's fairly presented, it's unmodified, but even better, the city, is in a strong financial position from just what the financial statements say. So unmodified is one measure, but the next measure is as you read the statements, what does it mean? What do they say? And it's good.
Okay, thank you. Doug?
I would echo Van's comments. That's one of the things that we pay attention to is the level of management focus on those fiduciary responsibilities that they have to the citizens to manage those receipts properly. So we pay attention to that in our discussions and in the financial statements that are produced as well. It's our sense of that is that there's a great deal of attention given, and that care is provided by city management to properly utilize those funds that come. This latest circumstance, that was my first impression. Was, 50%, that's an awful lot of money to be kicking around. But as you realize that those funds are very much like the funds most of us received as economic stimulus during the COVID pandemic time, those same kinds of funds flowed to cities and other governmental units to be used. And they are going to be used largely on this this new building that's to be built and the communications center as well. So I think the sense of the proper use of those funds is certainly evident in what we're seeing as members of the audit committee as well.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. We just want to sincerely say thanks on behalf of the council here.
So how long have you been doing this for our city?
We've probably been engaged with the city for 18 or so years.
Oh, okay, so me retiring had nothing to do. It was good before I left. Okay, good. Just wanted to make that clear with everybody.
Okay. All righty. Trace.
Well, we've heard about the reports and so forth. Just to discuss the 50% number just for a minute, one thing that I failed to mention in the previous meeting is that we do have funds already budgeted in the current budget year to spend down some of that that was there. So that percentage goes down from that, and then we have our projects that we mentioned and so forth. So it's not, not that we're out there too far. Overall, the numbers, I don't know that we want to spend too much time in this meeting tonight going over those. But the general fund, as we mentioned, about 21 million in unassigned fund balance. That's about 40% of revenue when we don't take into account the assigned fund balance. At some point, if you review over my information and you get to the enterprise funds, then we can have I'll keep it kind of short discussion on a couple of accounting standards that made these look a little confusing. But what I attempted to do in these is provide a reconciliation of you. If we took, for example, the water fund, and it says at the end of the year we had unrestricted net position of $18 million, then we would think, okay, that's getting up there, right? But if I tried to reconcile out some of the things that bring that down, we had carryover projects of 2.2 million, so that brings it down, to 15.8. We had budgeted use of fund balance in the current year of 6.1 million. And we're aware of the large projects that are in the CIP plan that use up those funds. And so in the end, when I reconcile some of these things out past what we're required to report at June 30th, we come down to 7.9 million, so that's kind of where we would expect to be. And the other number that I point out on that is the revenue number, which we've talked about a little bit. Charges for services in 2021, 12.2 million. Charges for services in 2022, 10.4 million. A direct effect of the drought and the restrictions that were put on water users in the city. That translated into a reduction in revenue of 1.7 million. And that goes back to our discussion in budget times last March, April, May, and then ultimately in June, when some rate increases were adopted so that we can continue to sustain the water utility in a pristine manner, right? It needs to be not just barely getting by. That's, a very valuable resource that has hundreds of millions of dollars invested in it over the decades that it's been around. So it needs to stay that way. It's very vital. That's just one of the enterprise funds that we could talk about. I don't know if, as you reviewed, I decided that we could come back to the sales tax review at another time. We'll have a meeting in January and we can go over that and discuss all of that. I don't know if, as you reviewed this information, if you had any questions for me at this time.
Council, did you have any questions regarding the financial review?
No questions, but kudos.
Okay.
You can brag a little for a month. And then we'll talk to you again.
Okay.
Well, I would like to add, too, I do appreciate the audit committee members. They gave some very valuable feedback to us. It's nice to have a nice set of eyes that's maybe looking at it as a citizen that actually has, no offense to other citizens, right, but a citizen who has extensive financial background and can really try and interpret what the financial statements are trying to say.
And so there was some really good feedback to me and my staff there as far as being able to understand what's being said in those. So that was great.
Yeah, that was good. Help simplify it and helps the rest of us understand.
Yeah. Other than that, I would just, if there's no other questions, recommend that the council accept the annual comprehensive financial report for review. That's what's required. And so if you do that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's our only consent item, so I'll look for action here, council, if somebody would like to make that recommendation.
I move that we accept the annual comprehensive financial report for fiscal year ending June 30, 2022.
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we accept the financial review. We'll do a roll call vote on this. So we'll start out with Councilmember Thomas.
Aye.
Your eyes was giving me like, what? Okay. Smith Edmonton?
Aye.
Okay. Morris?
Aye.
Councilman Bloxham? And Roberts?
Yes.
Okay, there you have it. It's a unanimous vote there. Okay, that's our end of our consent items. We really don't have a public hearing tonight. However, we do have one item of unfinished business that I just want to quickly acknowledge. I mean, usually we try to acknowledge each one of the council's birthdays and do some type of little celebration and cupcakes or whatever. But this month it's Tyson's birthday, and he had an unusual request. No cupcakes, no sweets, but he does like beef jerky. So we have beef jerky here to pass around and to wish Tyson a happy birthday.
Is that local stuff?
Utah raises a lot of beef, so we can maybe stretch the truth and say sure.
Okay, you get the first one out of the bag there, and then I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, this concludes our meeting for actually the year. So on behalf of myself and the council, we want to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year. Be safe, kind, and enjoy the holidays. Thank you.